Greetings, this is a reading of the book The Airship Golden Hind. Some of the language in this book has not aged well and is indeed no longer politically correct. Take caution when listening to this visual audio book. Footage and photography are provided by Photations. At Photation, we believe that the world would be a better place if people spent their time being creative. Join us in practicing art so we all can be the master of art. Find art prints available at our store www.photationsstore.com. Keep our artwork alive by making a donation at photationsdonations.com. The Airship Golden Hind by Percy F. Westerman. Chapter 10 Under Examination. I'm all right, I tell you. Ain't it all? Can a fellow know when he's all right? Thus Kenyon rather resentfully resisted all efforts on the part of the man to keep him in his bunk. He came from an indomitable stock that never readily admits defeat, and on this occasion he steadfastly refused to recognize the fact that his physical strength had been well nigh sapped. Donning his leather coat, he made his way to the navigation room, staggering slightly as he passed along the narrow alleyway. Wireless message just received, sir, reported Caption. From TB. Easy Brookie to Golden Hind. Am proceeding in search of you. Show position lights. Will transship Sir Reginald Fosterdyke and Brumston as soon as possible. Make necessary arrangements. We're steering N by W, but we haven't sighted the destroyer yet. Very good, concurred Kenyon. Carry on. He consulted the altimeter and the speed indicator. The former showed that the airship had descended to 2,000 feet, and the speed was 2,000 revolutions, or approximately 30 miles an hour. The Golden Hind had by this time retraced a good portion of her drift, and was now 3 or 4 miles from Suda. 10 minutes later, a masthead flashing lamp was seen blinking at a distance of about 6 miles. The light came from the destroyer Zeebrugge, which, pelting along at 25 knots, was on the lookout for the errant airship. Kenneth Kenyon was now on his mettle. For the first time he was in command of a large airship about to make a descent. As officer of the watch he had already had opportunities of observing the handling of the huge vessel, but now he found himself confronted with the problem of bringing her close to the surface of the sea so as to enable the destroyer to maneuver sufficiently enough to establish direct communication. Hope I don't make a bog of it, he soliloquized. I must admit I feel a bit rotten after that little jamboree just now. Still, I'll stick it. Although he was not aware of the fact, leading hand Jackson was keeping a sharp eye on his superior officer, ready at the first sign to take on shit. Kenyon physical strength failed him. For the next 10 minutes the greatest activity prevailed. Gongs were clanging, crisp orders were issued through various voice tubes. Gas was being withdrawn from various ballonets. The motors were constantly being either accelerated or retarded according to the condition demanded. The white flashing lamp signals were being exchanged with the BD. In the floor of the boat compartment of the Golden Hind, the large trap hatch had been opened close by crouched men ready to lower away a wire rope, at the end of which a small electric bulb glowed to enable the destroyer's crew to locate the line in the dark. Throughout the maneuver, neither the Golden Hind nor the Zeebrugge made use of their searchlights, since the dazzling rays might baffle their respective helmsmen and result in a collision. Slowly and gracefully the airship dropped until her fuselage was 30 feet from the surface of the sea. She was now dead in the wake of the destroyer, and the task that confronted Kenyon was to bring her ahead sufficiently for the bows to overlap the Zeebrug's stern. An error of judgment at that low height would result in the airship's bows fouling the destroyer's mast. Foot by foot, the Golden Hind gained upon the destroyer until a shout from the latter's deck announced that the wire rope had been made fast. Instantly, the airship's 6 motors were dead clutch. She was now moving merely under the towing action of the Zeebrugge, which was forging ahead at a bare 4 knots. From the trap hatch in the airship's bows, a rope ladder was lowered, its end being held by a couple of blue jackets on the T. BD. Without loss of time, Fosterdeck swarmed up the swing ladder and was followed by Bramston. Cast off, and thank you, shouted the baronet. All gone, came an answering voice from the Zeebrugge, followed by a hearty best of luck to you. Released, the Golden Hind leapt a full 500 feet into the air before the propellers began to revolve. Cheerio, Kenyon, exclaimed Fosterday, as he joined Kenneth in the navigation room. All's well that ends well, but you gave me a pretty bad turn. What happened? Hardly know, sir, replied Kenyon. Our wire rope didn't part. Possibly the shackle on the buoy gave, but we found a man hanging on the end of the wire. You did? Exclaimed the baronet sharply. What sort of man? You'll see him, sir, replied Kenneth. He's laid out below. Ejaculated Foster Egg, and relapsed into silence. He was deep in thought for some moments, then turned to Kenyon again. We're making an official start in a few minutes' time, he announced. We have to pass over the rock and display 3 red and 3 white lights to the official observer on Signal Hill. When we see a similar signal made from the rock, it will be the actual starting time. Pass the word for Jackson to get the lamps in position. At an altitude of 3,000 feet, or 1,500 feet above the summit of the Rock of Gibraltar, the Golden Hind received her official send-off at 3:35 am, 18 hours after the Hun owned 64. Evidently, there was not a minute to be wasted. The contest had developed not merely into a voyage round the world within the space of 20 days, but a race in which the British competitor had to make good her formidable handicap of 18 hours, or approximately 3,500 miles. With the wind abeam on the port side, the Golden Hind opened out to 140 miles an hour. During the earlier stages of the race, Fosterdyke rather wisely decided to keep below the maximum speed rather than overtax the motors by running all out. Within a few minutes of receiving her official permit to depart, the airship lost sight of the lights upon the Rock of Gibraltar. She was now steering by as a course that would take her over the northern part of Algeria and Tunis, and within a few miles of Malta. At Fora and Kenyon, who had modestly refrained from giving any details of the part he had taken in the rescue of Enrico Yours, and had concealed the fact that he had been temporarily out of action, was relieved by Peter Branson. As he turned to go to his cabin, Kenneth saw that the baronet was standing in a corner of the navigation room and studying a nautical almanac. Sleep well, Kenyon, exclaimed Fosterdyke. You submarines to make up. Rather, sir, agreed Kenyon, but we've forgotten something. What? That fellow we found hanging on to the wire rope. We didn't put him on board the destroyer. No, agreed Fosterdyke grimly. We didn't, I saw to that. Unless I am much mistaken, our unwanted supernumerary can and must give us certain information that will rather astonish us. I'll see him later on. By Jove. Kenyon nodded knowingly. Evidently, Fosterdyke had learned something, however, as far as he, Kenyon, was concerned. Other things of a more pressing nature demanded his attention, food, and sleep. At 8 o'clock, Fosterdyke ordered his involuntary guest to be brought up before him. There's something fishy about the breaking adrift business, he observed to Branston, as the two sat at a table in the after cabin awaiting Enrico's appearance. Where's Jackson? We'll want him. No, don't disturb Kenyon. He had a pretty sticky time. More than you imagine, sir, added Peter, and proceeded to tell the baronet the part Kenneth had played in the aerial rescue of the Emerald Rock Scorpion. Kenyon didn't say a word about. He added on the conclusion of the narrative he was as mute as an oyster over it all. Frampton and Collins told me it was. A knock on the cabin door interrupted Branston's explanation. Come in, exclaimed Fosterdyke. In answer to the invitation, entered leading hand Jackson, followed in single file by one of the crew, Enrico Yours, and two other members of the Golden Hind's company. The Scorp was still laboring under the effects of his narrow escape. He looked, to quote Branston's words, as if the stuffing had been knocked out of him. Fosterdyke's handling of the situation was a bold one. Without any preliminaries, without even asking the fellow's name, he demanded sternly, "How much did Count Karl von Senzig promise you for last night's work?" Yours gave an involuntary start, but almost immediately relapsed into his imperturbably passive attitude. Then, with a slight shrug of his shoulders, he replied, "Me no speak English." "Try again," said Fosterdyke, contracting his bushy eyebrows and looking straight at the man. "All I can say is that if you don't speak English, it's a case of won't. And I can't." "Me no speak English," reiterated Yours. Without speaking, Fosterdyke looked straight at the fellow for a full 30 seconds. During that period, Enrico attempted 3 times to meet the searching gaze of his inquisitor. "Now," exclaimed the baronet at length. Enrico Yours maintained silence. Fosterdyke slowly and deliberately unstrapped his wristlet watch and placed it on the table. "I give you 30 seconds," he said in muffled tones. 30 seconds in which to make up your mind either to answer or refuse to answer my question. Might I remind you that we are now 8,000 feet above the sea, and it is a long drop. Jackson, will you please remove the hatch?" "Of course, the old man was only kidding," remarked Jackson when he related what had transpired to his companions after the affair was over. "But, bless me, even I thought he meant to do the dirty sleep in." He looked that stern that Abe put the wind up the bloke straight away. Absolutely disciplined, the leading hand obeyed orders, promptly throwing back the aluminum cover in the center of the cabin floor. He revealed to the gaze of the thoroughly terrified Yours a rectangular opening 6 feet by 4. Far below, glittering in the sunshine, was the blue Mediterranean. 5 seconds more, announced Fosterdyke calmly. Of the occupants of the after cabin, Enrico Yours now seemed to be the least interested in the proceedings. His furtive glances had given place to an expression of lofty detachment, as if he were utterly bored by the whole transaction. Branston found himself deciding that either the fellow was an imbecile or else he was a past master in the art of dissimulation. Time, declared Fosterdike. Enrico, yours positively beamed. Me no speak English, he babbled. Sir Reginald eyed the accused sternly, but even his piercing glance seemed of no avail. The rock scorp continued to smile inwardly. Take him away, ordered Fosterdike with asperity. He waited till the door had closed upon the involuntary guest, and then gave a deprecatory shrug. The fellow scored this time, Bramston, he remarked, but I'll get to windward of him yet.